and welcome to what annual event I believe you've all been waiting for. At long last, we are going to be looking at the SpongeBob Movie Game. As comments have been informing me for the past 3 years, the SpongeBob Movie Game is a game based off of the SpongeBob movie, and is somewhat of a spiritual successor to a game we've covered here previously, the SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom game. You see, Heavy Iron, the company that made these games, was contracted to make a tie-in game for the movie in under a year's time, and so by reusing assets and artifacts from the previous game, I think that made the task a little bit less daunting for them. So what we have here is a game whose levels, scenarios, and plot were derived from the movie, but whose gameplay and mechanics were copied directly over from a game released just a year prior. It definitely gives the game a certain level of quality that I don't think would have been possible in any other way within that timeline, and it kind of makes it feel slightly less like a cheap licensed tie-in game and more like a real game. But we'll get there when we get there. Now, as is tradition with these yearly SpongeBob videos, and since this might very well be the last time we do this, it's first necessary for us to look back on and reflect upon the previous SpongeBob games in order to fully understand the context in which this one should be received. I'll try to cut this one short though because this part gets longer and longer every year.
Manager coming through.
First, SpongeBob SquarePants Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. This game is a total joke and you should never play it. So one of the key things to remember about it was its misuse of the SpongeBob, I will say brand, or you could say license. Basically, it just didn't do SpongeBob justice. From the moment SpongeBob wakes up without his classic alarm clock going off, you know exactly what you're getting into. None of the characters had any charm, the environments weren't consistent with the show, the animations were total garbage, I mean total freaking garbage. Like, you'd have SpongeBob leaning back for a throw, but parts of his model, like his pants, were just anchored to a specific point in 3D space. It was actual total garbage. The gameplay itself was neither fun nor functional. It amounted mostly to extremely simple platforming, when of course the collisions worked. Other than this, there was a costume mechanic that saw the player switching outfits in order to gain a new function for the B button, among possibly other special traits. This mechanic was also surprisingly solely responsible for the music in the game. Unlike most games that feature a broad track list to match every scenario and event, the background music in every part -2 of this game was dependent on the costume that the character was wearing. This was made even worse by the fact that of all the costumes, one was vastly overused. The jellyfishing gear was used in a variety of fetch quests and could perform the same basic actions as other costumes, meaning that for pretty much the entire game, you'd be listening to the same slow and calming 1 minute and 20-second jellyfishing song on loop. From actual jellyfishing to scaling the top of a lighthouse in a thunderstorm, this one song would be the backbone of your entire experience with this game. And speaking of jellyfishing, the game had some notoriously redundant fetch quests involving catching outrageous numbers of jellyfish consecutively. The most infamous of the bunch, the jellyfishing contest, which required a total of 100 jellyfish, was also plagued by a couple of tropes that I'm now aware of the titling and classification of because someone actually cited my breakdown of disbelief on tvtropes.org. So, if you're the one who did that and you're watching this, thank you, I think. Anyways, apparently this is called a guide, dang it. It's where some critical piece of information is obscured or the game neglects to even provide it to you in the first place. In this case, it was that the jellyfishing contest considers your total jellyfish count, which is only accessible from the pause screen, rather than the current area jellyfish count that is a part of the game's GUI layer and only displays the number of jellyfish that you've caught in your current area. The detrimental effects of this issue were only amplified by the fact that the entire area of jellyfish fields only housed a grand total of 84 jellyfish, causing many people to get stumped to believe they missed some section of the map, you know? The logical thing to think when you've literally caught every jellyfish in a whole freaking area, but the counter only says 84 and the guy says he wants 100 and he's all the way back at the beginning of the level, so you don't want to backtrack all the way there for nothing. So you spend hours and hours and hours looking around and then you either give up or you get lost and eventually you end up at the beginning anyways, so you finally talk to him, possibly accidentally because you just passed by him, only to discover that you've already completed the challenge and have won the contest without knowing. Of course, only if you actually have 16 jellyfish in stock from some other previous levels of the game. If you haven't, then the game gives you literally no indication as to what you've done wrong! Oh, 3 years later, I'm still tilted over this. It's literally the worst section of any game ever. And immediately after this, the next quest asks you to catch another 50 jellyfish in order to buy a bus ticket. It's like the game is testing your patience. How long can you survive this? That's the meta of Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. It talks to you on a deeper level about the human experience, and that's why it's actually one of the greatest. I'm freaking kidding. It's total garbage. It's one of the freaking worst games ever made. Next, Battle for Bikini Bottom. Going into this one, I really didn't know what to expect. What I got, though, was a really freaking solid 3D platformer and a great piece of SpongeBob product. The way I've come to describe Battle for Bikini Bottom is that it kind of takes a long, hard look at everything having to do with SpongeBob and finds ways to turn them into a game. This is evident from the moment the game begins and SpongeBob wakes up to, you guessed it, his alarm clock.
The next morning.
The game actually looked and felt like SpongeBob. Every feature of the game was coated in this thick layer of SpongeBob, from the death animation with the hand dragging you back into specific episode references. Gameplay-wise, it boiled down to collecting and platforming with some mild combat and puzzle solving thrown into the mix. I wouldn't put it on the same level as the mechanically intensive 3D Mario platforms, but I'd be comfortable putting it around the same level as something like Banjo-Kazooie. I mean, sure, it's just a cartoony platformer collectathon, but what really helped was that the cartoon it comes from is something that players were already familiar with. It's SpongeBob! All of the environments, music, and characters were already known to the player. The game just sort of brought them all to life like never before. The game can be really challenging at times and has one of the greatest final bosses I've ever seen in a 3D platformer. It has a couple of phases, but the last one is literally just a really hard platforming and combat stage. Like that's a platforming boss done right! It actually tests you on all of the skills you've been learning the entire game. The game is really good, and it doesn't misuse or abuse the SpongeBob brand. It represents it extremely effectively and very respectfully. Without that coat of SpongeBob paint on it, though, it definitely wouldn't be as interesting of a product. But that's the thing, this game couldn't have existed mechanically without SpongeBob. Battle for Bikini Bottom is inseparable from SpongeBob. Every idea this game implements came from SpongeBob. This game is about taking SpongeBob and making it into a game, which I have to say it does so expertly. Now, briefly, it's worth pointing out that these two games were released a short time away from each other. I've mentioned before that it's very likely that some of the initial phases of Battle for Bikini Bottom's production were going on around the same time as Revenge of the Flying Dutchman's final phases and release were happening. On Nickelodeon's end, both game licensings must have been at some point on the same table at the same time. That being the case would kind of harm the reputation of Dutchman even more. It being released was definitely damaging to the SpongeBob brand. I mean, the negative reception got a studio shut down and upset a lot of kids. Having been able to see the quality of both titles and the respective game studios, the fact that the decision was made to release Dutchman anyways kind of paints it in an even worse light. It was an awful game being released with knowledge of the ongoing development of a much greater game. What harm it did to SpongeBob's name probably wasn't worth whatever profits it generated, but that's just my opinion. I mean, just out of personal experience, when I played Revenge of the Flying Dutchman and saw how crap it was, I steered clear of all future SpongeBob games. I missed out on some great experiences like Battle for Bikini Bottom because I attributed SpongeBob game to bad. So right there you can see that the game damaged my personal view of SpongeBob, but it also prevented me from purchasing other games because I already made that association. There's also SpongeBob HeroPants, but guess what? We don't have to talk about that one because it came out in 2016, way after these two, and honestly, the less we talk about HeroPants, the better. There's a reason it's currently the lowest end of the ordinal game rating scale, right below Flying Dutchman. Anyways, if you want any more details about those games, I invite you to watch those year's videos. There's definitely a lot I've glossed over. I'm just trying to give a brief overview of the stuff we'll need to fully understand and appreciate today's video. So after the great success of Battle for Bikini Bottom, and as mentioned before, Heavy Iron was given the opportunity to work on the associated game for the upcoming SpongeBob movie, SpongeBob the Movie Game. So how does it fare? Well, to put it one way, SpongeBob does not wake up to his alarm clock. Actually, a better way to put it would be that his alarm clock doesn't even exist anymore. Now that's both literal, as the game doesn't begin with SpongeBob waking up, but it's also figurative and consistent with the meaning we've already assigned to that iconic alarm. You see, Battle for Bikini Bottom felt like SpongeBob turned into a game. The movie game kind of feels like a game with SpongeBob crap loosely attached to it. Like, nothing about the game really benefits particularly from SpongeBob. It's a whole different format from the previous games, and it adds tons of features that are just really, really gamey. Like, I mean, these additions don't come from any interpretation of SpongeBob, they came from things other games do. So what it comes off feeling like is this garbled mess of typical platforming elements with a few SpongeBob things here and there. It's not so great as a game, and it's not so great as a SpongeBob game either. See, Battle for Bikini Bottom opens, and after a really brief and pretty funny tutorial, it throws you into a living freaking hub world with tons of things to do, tons of familiar characters to meet, and a bunch of levels to enter. As the game progressed, you unlocked new areas of the hub world that themselves housed entrances to additional levels. They basically turned Bikini Bottom into Mario 64's castle. It looked good, it was well made, and it wasn't a waste of time. It made the game feel more believable, and it really brought these iconic SpongeBob worlds to life. Hey! Life. 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 Oh! Ho! 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 The movie Movie Game, likely as a result of time constraints, it does away with hub worlds. If there's a single thing you should know about this game, it's this change and its implications on everything else. With the removal of hub worlds, the game's levels had to adapt and become entirely linear. The game progresses straight forward. Each level is supposed to lead directly into the next, which seriously limits their creativity. In Bikini Bottom's hub world structure, each level could act as its own sort of mini-world that had multiple challenges to complete within it. Again, just like how there are multiple stars to get in each world of Mario 64. So some levels had players exploring different paths with different playable characters for different mission objectives, and this was great. You'd see things that you couldn't necessarily interact with yet, but you'd go back once you had a required upgrade. Some levels even acted as sub-hub worlds with their own sub-levels hosted within them. For example, the fantastic SpongeBob Dream level or the Ski World. These levels had some missions within their main areas, but also had entrances to new smaller areas. Like you could go into all of SpongeBob's friends' dreams to do challenges, or you could take all of the different ski slopes and get a different reward for each one. This was really good level design. In this way, it kind of expanded upon some of the stuff we've seen in other more critically acclaimed 3D platformers. Honestly, like, it was really good. But now this game, it's completely linear. Each level you just make a beeline for the exit. This severely limits the creativity within stages. Each level still needed to have multiple objectives though, but instead of actually being different parts of those areas, what happens is that you always have one long main path to follow with little self-contained areas that kind of branch off for other quests. So like here, you're moving down this course, but in the corner there's a cave, and if you go back into it and do the little bungee jump challenge, you'll get another peanut fritter or whatever the heck this is. When you're done, you just get out of the cave and you continue on your way. These things normally aren't out of your way to begin with, and they don't really add any value to the level. The other game's level design was kind of like, you know, getting out of the metro station and knowing that you have to go to school, but then instead seeing the arcade and just being like, I'm gonna go there instead, and you get rewarded for that. Whereas this game is kind of like, you're on your way to school and you're going, and then there's a coffee shop, and you stop and get a coffee, and then you come back, and then you just continue walking. This is a very important part of the script. Oof. Now, not all stage challenges are like this. Others are much more clearly the result of having to cut corners in order to complete the game on time. Some mini-missions are not integrated into the design of the main area itself, but are instead played in these little extra secret worlds. You get to these special challenge worlds by finding magic panels throughout each level that take you to them. There are 3 types of challenge levels in the game, and honestly it's worth looking into them because they segregate the game's various features pretty well in a way that makes it easier to demonstrate the problems with them. So the first challenge area is the combat one. Here, well, you just fight tons of enemies. And holy crap, do I mean tons of enemies. Like, you'll be taking on 30, then 40, then 50 dudes in waves before you finish. Now, combat abilities themselves aren't so bad. It's mostly the same as Battle for Bikini Bottoms, but Patrick has a couple more powers, which I assume is only to account for the removal of Sandy as a playable character. The game also featured a power-up system for all of your moves, so depending on how macho you are, these challenges will change in difficulty. The real reason the combat is so awful, though, has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with the enemies. So the enemies in these combat stages are also the enemies that appear throughout the entirety of the game. The basic enemy, the standard freaking first enemy, the intro enemy, the enemy you will see the most of throughout the entire game is this freaking dude. And I swear to God, he is the worst designed enemy in the history of gaming. Think of any game you played and think of that first most basic enemy type you encounter. Well, let's look at Battle for Bikini Bottom, for example. Oh, cool, little robot dudes that run straight at you and are super easy to kill. Fantastic, wonderful. So what do these guys do? Well, they run straight at you, but when they get close, they spew these giant balls of gas around, which has this huge hitbox, and it's really, really hard to avoid. The worst parts about this guy are, 1, that his speed matches, if not is actually faster than yours, and 2, he sometimes takes multiple hits to take out and doesn't flinch. So you're moving around, you get close to try to hit him, but your proximity will trigger his attack, and depending on how long it takes for you to try to maneuver around him to get a hit, his attack might already be activated and boom, you take a hit anyways. Either that or, you know, you'll just get hit by one of the other 50 dudes running around too. Oh, this guy's great. This guy is the worst enemy. The guy with the dog. Okay, so what this guy does is you get close and then he starts spinning around with the dog, right? So, you know, you've played a bunch of games before, so you can kind of predict what his behavior will be. So he spins around for a bit, you've got to avoid him, right? And then eventually he'll get dizzy and he'll be vulnerable, right? Wrong! He never stops spinning! He doesn't stop! He never becomes vulnerable! The only way to kill this guy is A, you can kill him before he starts spinning, or B, you can try to do the slam, which sometimes results in you getting hit anyways if you're playing as Patrick, or if you're playing as SpongeBob, you can use the what is it, the freaking bowling ball with lightning or whatever, you can try to do that. But this guy does not stop. You think he's gonna stop, but he doesn't. And while he's spinning, it's not even like he's slower than you. He's just as fast as you. He's just as fast. And they throw him in the middle of a boss fight, and then what are you supposed to do? In the boss fight, right, you're Patrick, right? So what you're supposed to be doing is grabbing the watermelons and throwing them at the dude. But these guys are spinning at you, and you have to, like, it's not like they're slower so you can pick up the watermelon anyways. It's not like they're just like an obstacle. You have to take them out because they run just as fast as you. How do you miss the mark by that much on a freaking basic enemy? A basic freaking, okay, one stage up from basic enemy, but how do you mess up that much? This guy's gotta spin and then be vulnerable, come on! Some enemies have this awful combination of projectile attacks and proximity lasers that keep you from getting close, so the game asks you to deflect their shots back at them. So you see, with the upgraded basic attack, you're able to deflect ranged attacks. But the problem is that the collision detection for this seems to be linked to the character's actual freaking arms. And since they spin their arms from one side to the other, it's really tricky to learn the timing for this. It's kind of like playing tennis with a racket whose action is predetermined. So for example, you can deflect shots coming from the left side much sooner because that's where his arms start. But if a shot is coming to you from the right side or the center, you have to adjust your timing. It's most noticeable when these horizontal goo wave shots come at you, because sometimes you'll have the right timing to hit a few of the projectiles from the left, but the ones from the center to the right will hit you anyways. It should have just been a temporary deflection effect or something, maybe with a time limit, or maybe with a limit to how many you could do. This is overly complex and unpredictable. As a result of this finicky and mandatory deflection technique, the combat against projectile enemies becomes total crap. When possible, the fight just crashes to a halt as you just stand there, motionless, waiting for the thing to come close enough for you to smack it back, because the less movement, the better. What's awful is when the game forces you to stay on the move while dealing with these enemies and gives you camera angles that you're not fully in control of. For example, the final boss! I'll talk more about this disgrace of a fight later, but basically, during the final phase, you have to dodge these area-sweeping attacks while handling 2 projectile-shooting enemies, who, by the way, have special projectiles that if you either get hit by or step in the impact of, cause you to take damage and have slippery movement. The only worthwhile way to take these guys out is to deflect their attacks. But since the camera angle is restricted here, it's hard to tell your position relative to the goo ball, and so it's hard to time the deflection slap. The necessity to keep dodging these ground sweeps impairs your ability to perform even more, because now you have to try to do this whole process while shifting between floor and mid-air. And guess how many perfect deflections it takes to kill each of these 2 guys? 3! It takes 3 perfect hits each, so a total of 6. And every time you dodge every sweep in this ground sweep attack twice in a row, the boss does this other move that has the camera change to his perspective for way too much time. So if you haven't already taken these 2 goo slingers out, now you're screwed because you can't even see them anymore. So basically, this phase of the final boss asks you to land 6 deflections while constantly jumping, and I forgot to mention, but running around the stage to hit these rotated tables and whatever, all in the span of 2 of this dude's sweeping attacks, which each last like maybe 10 seconds or something each. And after you pull this feat off once, you have to do it again! You have to do this whole thing twice. It's bananas! So, yeah, the combat is not good. The basic enemies are trash. All of the other enemies are too gimmicky or just way too challenging or also trash. The boss battles range from the sort of thing that you can do with your brain on autopilot to the sorts of things that you'll be spending hours trying to master. There's not a single part of the game where I thought the combat was enjoyable or fair, with the exception, of course, being that final combat challenge area with Patrick. That one was nice. I liked that one. I have no problem with killing jellyfish. The second challenge area is called the Puzzle Challenge, but really it's just a platforming challenge. Now, for the most part, the main game's platforming isn't that complicated. Progression is maybe a little too smooth. I mean, you never feel halted by anything. So these areas are where the game really tries to flex its platforming muscles, and it's thus where we see that it clearly skipped a few gym sessions and really shouldn't be proud of this. These challenges involve a lot of stepping between rotating blocks. These challenges involve exclusively stepping between rotating blocks, timing your jumps properly, dealing with blocks that have different behavior, and getting the peanut snack under the time limit. It's kind of very much like it's trying to be the secret stages in Mario Sunshine. Here's the matter though. The platforming mechanics in this game are not optimized for this sort of situation. Sometimes you'll be doing everything right, but the physics go completely wonky and you go flying off the side of a block. Other times you get saved by that same wonkiness, bouncing straight up after hitting an angled trampoline at the last minute. Oh, my absolute favorite is this little climbing animation. So, like, if you barely make it to a platform, sometimes the character will grab onto the ledge and pull themselves up. It's really funny because it's horrendously long for what it is, and the characters will even do it on these ice blocks that shrink as soon as you make contact with them. Which seems to happen a lot more often since the curved shape of these blocks makes it hard to tell exactly where the edge is on them. As soon as this animation begins, you're already as good as dead, but you still have to sit through the whole thing, and finally fall just to restart. Of course, without the timer being reset. Oh, you heard me right. Sometimes a fall like this can cost you the feasibility of the challenge in the remaining time, and it's worth just restarting from the beginning. Oh, but wait! You can't actually just restart the time challenge whenever. I mean, you could go through the menus and reload the whole stage, but that would mean sitting through a loading screen again, which, by the way, is subject to the infrequent endless loop and crash. So sometimes it's actually a better decision to just sit there and wait for the timer to run out instead. This is a freaking time trial. The one and only feature that should be required in a mode like this is a quick way to reset and try again. If you goof up before the first checkpoint, that's time lost for no reason. You should just be able to scrap the run and restart, but you can't. This is crap. The final special challenge type is the SpongeBob level. SpongeBob was featured in a few sections of Battle for Bikini Bottom and really didn't handle well. I think the idea to make separate mini levels dedicated to this feature are a good idea though, because I'll be honest, it's not full of crap as a concept. But I definitely don't think these levels are good by any means. Actually, these levels allow me to bring up a problem that's extremely important to understand and that happens a few times throughout the game. So let's take a look at what I believe is the final SpongeBob level specifically. So you start the level, you roll down, you ride over the things that flip around, up and over the hump. Oh, and I just missed the rotating spiral bridge. I'm just gonna have to wait for the next one. So you wait for the next one, you get on, you proceed, you probably die eventually somewhere up ahead, you get reset, but hey, here's your chance to go faster and catch the first spin of that spiral bridge. So you zip straight forward and you missed it again. That's kind of weird. Let me let you in on a little secret, huh? It's actually impossible to make it to the first rotation of the spiral bridge. It's completely impossible. No matter what you do, each and every time you restart this level, you are forced to wait at this little ledge here for the thing to spin around and take you. See, the concept of trial and error gameplay is pretty strongly related to the platformer genre. You get these long obstacle course-like sections that force you to get good at one part before trying the next, then of course asking you to restart the entire thing if you mess up. At that point though, you should be an expert at those earlier parts, being able to blast through them quickly. Now there's this unwritten rule when it comes to this sort of level design in platformers. Each platforming section has to have at least one optimal solution, one super quick way through it, one combination of platform timing that allows the player to dash and hop their way through it without stopping for a single second. The idea is that through multiple attempts and opportunities to try, the player's behavior over the course of the level will at some rate converge to this optimal solution. This is actually just the definition of learning. Being able to constantly improve your performance over every consecutive attempt feels good. No mistake is lost without a lesson learned that will contribute to your next attempt. Having that one perfect approach to every level is a fundamental part of platformers. The lack of this in the movie game, however, has extremely detrimental effects. Every time you restart the level for failing and are forced to wait, it feels like a punishment. It's negative reinforcement for no fault of your own. It's definitely infuriating on repeated attempts, and I would argue that it greatly slows down the learning process. You just get madder and madder, sitting here waiting for nothing. Unlike most games that see you get faster each time, here you still have to wait for that stupid bridge every single time. And this SpongeBob level isn't even the worst. This mission, the Chocolate River, has you jumping across platforms that are flowing slowly down this stream while these razors wipe across the plane. It takes a good amount of trial and error to get this right, but every time you fail and get thrown back to the beginning, the slow-moving marshmallow platforms get cleared from the screen, and you have to wait like almost a solid freaking minute for them to reach you. By the time you get to try again, you've already forgotten what killed you the last time, increasing the chances that you'll make the same mistake multiple times in a row. This is like the game design equivalent of body horror. It's taking something that should be familiar and distorting its fundamentals in such a way that it's barely recognizable anymore. This right here, these platforms moving slowly down the Chocolate River, the player not being able to do anything, just sitting there waiting. This is how games cry. Honestly, I think a single instance of something like this is enough to write off a game. Just like in Dutchman, you know, proper instructions are fundamental to collectathons, so violating that in a single instance is enough to call the game awful. Properly paced and timed platforming sections are fundamental to platforming games. You can't have one without the other, and just based on the amount of time wasted waiting for this crap and the adverse effect it has on learning, that to me is enough to write off the platforming in this game. The platforming is junk. It's not worth talking about beyond this point. Sorry. Well, now that that's out of the way, let's get back on track. So the levels are entirely linear with a few self-contained branching paths and special challenge panels. Well, you might be asking yourself right about now, how do you revisit these levels? Can you revisit the levels? And how does that work? I'm glad you asked! So to make up for not having a hub world, the pause screen actually has a list of all of the levels and each of their sub-levels, allowing you to warp to any one you like at any time. But didn't Battle for Bikini Bottom have that same exact system and a hub world? Yeah, it did. You could use the taxi service from the pause screen to take you to any challenge in any level you wanted, assuming of course that you'd at least already been within the challenge's vicinity once. This was a great feature that made navigation through these large mini world stages much easier. If you wanted to go somewhere in particular to collect something, you could just taxi yourself to the nearest challenge checkpoint and then proceed the rest of your way yourself. It was great. Unfortunately, the presence of these special challenge worlds in the movie game had to interfere with this extremely handy feature too. Let me explain to you how awful this is with an example. So as you may know, I streamed my first gameplay recording session of this game. One of the last things I did in that session was the aforementioned SpongeBob level with the lack of timing. After eventually completing that, I was brought back to the challenge's parent level, one called Shell City Dead Ahead. Unfortunately, my resolve was worn thin at this point, so I didn't make it much further before ending the stream. I did not complete the level before stopping. When I came back a few days later for another recording session, I was surprised to see that my progress through the level's main course was reset. I figured that just like Battle for Bikini Bottom, I could just use the warp system for navigation and bring myself back to the SpongeBob challenge panel, which, as I recall, was much further down than I currently was. I did this and was unpleasantly presented the actual SpongeBob level rather than the area right in front of the panel. It turns out that warping takes you into the actual challenge worlds. So to accomplish my intended action, I would have to re-complete the hardest and most discouraging SpongeBob level in the entire game. My options were that or restart the entire level from scratch. After spending approximately 11 minutes both trying to do this and writing notes about how much I hated trying to do this, I had to give up and just actually restart the level. That right there, that was not a good time. There's also no reason for the game to be like that. Battle for Bikini Bottom was this incredible game. If you watched that video or played the game yourself, you know just how much attention to detail there was in all elements of it. This sort of stuff right here shows you just how much they dropped the sponge ball on this game. There are so many simple little things that go wrong, and over the course of the game, it just builds up and up and up until you can't freaking stand it anymore. Who thought it was a good idea to warp you into the actual freaking challenge level? Who? Why not just take you back to the panel? Wouldn't that also be less resource intensive? You don't have to load a whole new level in if you're already there. Oh, I forgot, this was the sort of game that has the freaking disc reader on the Wii going bananas like up and down the disc trying to read information stored all over it while you're just standing still in the level doing literally nothing. I don't think optimization was on anybody's mind over the course of this project. Hey, can Heavy Iron give you a refund for giving your Wii CD drive freaking whiplash? Nah? Ah, crap. Now, this is just one of many elements that were brought over from Battle for Bikini Bottom and then taken and modified and mutilated beyond recognition by the movie game. So remember the sliding sections from the previous game? It felt like a gimmick, but it wasn't, because every level included at least one sliding section. These slides were for the most part pretty short, though there were some more sliding intensive areas like the ski slopes or Sandy's Dream. In this game, sliding makes a return, though rather than just being a sub-part of each level, there are entirely dedicated sliding levels for no discernible reason. These levels are just slides. They're just really, really long slides. Some of them last upwards of 5 minutes and they're needlessly deep. You see, just like the main stages that have multiple different challenges within them to get those Goofy Goober cookies, they needed to find a way for these standalone sliding levels to offer just as many rewards as the rest. What they did was include various challenges like time trials and ring trials in each of these slides. So on your first run, you may take a pretty suboptimal path, but on subsequent attempts, you'll discover shortcuts and alternate paths that speed up your time. The issue is that each of these modes is completely broken. That's a pretty big issue. Firstly, you can only tackle one challenge at a time. So even if you beat the ultimate time trial time on your first time trial run, you'll still need to do it again after. Same thing for if you beat the time on a ring challenge, which, by the way, shows you the fastest path anyways. So, like, doing a ring challenge basically implies also having beaten the final time trial time, but you still have to do the thing all over again once you're done the ring challenge. I know it's a little bit hard to follow, but what I'm saying is that these slide levels have 4 different things to do in them, and each of those 4 things could be done in one shot. But for some reason, the game restricts you from being able to do them in one shot and forces you to replay the thing 4 times. terrible is that some of these tracks require you to do certain things to complete them. For example, the first one, which unless you jump off the ledge here, will have you looping around the same area indefinitely. Now the reason that's so bad is that there's no real indication as to what you're supposed to do sometimes. This is much worse in the final sliding level in Shell City, where you have to destroy these faucets and light bulbs and open new available paths. But what the game fails to indicate to you, though, is where those new paths are. But here's the thing, if you die, you get a short clue as to where you're supposed to go. So why doesn't this little clip play as soon as you complete the objective? Like, I took out the light bulbs, show me where the new path I opened up is, because I don't see it. As a result of this, I repeatedly killed myself on this stage trying to get a look at where I had to go. I had no idea where this little piece of whatever the heck that I'm supposed to jump on was. The layout of these tracks makes no sense sometimes. The sliding mechanics themselves, though, just aren't good enough to hold their own. Like, the camera doesn't even look into your turns, and so sometimes you'll be pulling a sharp one and the screen just doesn't show you what you need to see. Often the HUD elements get in the way. Like, why is the camera pointing tangentially to these turns? Again, maybe you could show me where I'm going? I can't freaking see what's in front of me. Hey game, please? Please? The sliding itself isn't good, and the levels where you do the sliding are not well designed. It's just not good. Then of course there are also the newly added driving sections. The driving is alright. I mean, the car kind of handles like crap, but the tracks don't ask too much of you in terms of driving skill though, so it's okay. Just like, don't hit anything, because the walls are like glue or something. Exactly like the sliding areas, each driving challenge has additional time trials and a ring trial. The main challenge for each one, though, always has some sort of gimmick attached to it, which is fun. For example, trying to find the keys to unlock the gate, or chasing the peanut dude, or avoiding Plankton's timed obstacles. It's pretty cool. Now, other than the fact that your previously recorded times don't apply to the time trial challenges, I can't complain about them, though that is a pretty big complaint. What I can complain a lot about, though, are the ring challenges. So these ring challenges suffer, or cause the player to suffer over a really simple mistake. The game only shows you one ring ahead at a time. In tracks with branching paths and special things to do, this is a freaking sin! In the driving stages in particular, it's actually impossible to predict where the next ring will be sometimes, and the time limit for each ring is ridiculously short. Like, you cannot mess up during these ring races, which is dumb because that basically just makes them time trials. You don't have enough time to both spot and go to the ring. It's one or the other. So actually completing the ring challenges requires an enormous amount of trial and error. You have to run the race multiple times and memorize each ring location, because not every lap's rings will take you down the same path. And unlike the time trial mode that allows you to continue the driving and train in the level even after the timer runs out, the ring challenges reset you back to the beginning every time you fail. So they don't even have the courtesy of letting you continue and learn the positions of the rings ahead. You just keep inching your way slightly further and further every time until you've memorized the entire layout of the track. Sure, you know what? If this was a 60-second freaking slide level, that'd be fine. But some of these take upwards of 5 minutes! When you've invested that much time into a freaking crappy and boring driving or sliding ring challenge, only to watch a ring expire literally inches away from you towards the end, that's terrible. The best, oh the best, is this other ring challenge with the guided music rocket thing. Once you get this final ability, you can try these special flying ring missions. The same problem arises though. Barely anything is done to indicate to you the direction you're supposed to be going in. I mean, sometimes the rotation of the ring kind of gives you a hint as to how you should fly through it, but sometimes it just doesn't. Like this level where you're supposed to aim downwards into a tunnel after flying through this ring. Something that you just don't know because the tunnel has a wall blocking your view of the next ring. And even these aren't quick and easy challenges. They're long and tricky, and the fact that you can't tell where the next ring is without just failing at least once is absurd. This guided missile doesn't handle very well. There are some rings that you just can't get on your first try if you weren't already anticipating them. Like, that's a fact. You don't have enough maneuverability to both spot the next ring and make the necessary movements to go to it. You can only do one or the other per attempt, basically. The mechanics of this missile just do not lend themselves to the sort of challenge they built for it. Like the Goofy Goober one. So this is like the first level in the game, and it has one of these missile ring challenges. So you shoot the thing, and you're going, and then you go into this dark tunnel sort of area, and, well, then what? What are you supposed to do? You can try turning in any direction for a bit and maybe eventually find an exit, but I just keep hitting the wall. Throwing a high-speed guided missile into a dark tunnel and asking the player to guess which way to go and then eventually memorize that is insane. This is one of the worst designed things I think I've seen in any game ever. Metal Gear Solid 1's missile levels were better than this.
Impressive.
These extra challenges like the time trials and the ring trials and stuff are just way too hard for you to care. These are the sorts of uber complex things that should be left to completionists who actually want to do this stuff. And it's an absolute travesty that they're not. Yes, to a certain extent, these extra gimmick challenge levels like ring trials and time trials are absolutely mandatory. Of all of the things that the movie game imports and modifies from Battle for Bikini Bottom, the concept of completion is the most blasphemous. The amount of artificial lengthening and padding in this game is unprecedented. This is a freaking SpongeBob game. If it also happens to be a good game, wow, that's a plus. Whoever cares enough will enjoy playing more of it optionally. This is what Battle for Bikini Bottom did. You only needed a generously small number of golden spatulas to unlock the final boss. And if you really were invested enough to get the rest, you could. The game never forced you to do any challenges you didn't want to. There was enough elbow room to avoid entire areas like I did with the awful kelp forest stage. This game doesn't require a full 100% completion, but it does require you to do absolutely freaking absurd things in the name of minimal requirements. You see, almost every new level blocks your progress by requiring you to have a new ability in order to make the first couple of steps. You're told that having a certain number of goofy peanuts is the key that will unlock this new ability. The issue lies in the greatness of those numbers. Every time this happens, the value grows by increments of 10, and at the end of the game, having the mermaid girl rebuild your car requires 50 goobers. So what you have to do whenever this happens is you've got to open up that pause screen and scroll back through all of the previous levels, looking for missions that you didn't do before, either because you didn't want to, or you didn't have the right powers to do it the first time. Now, that ratio of missions you didn't do because you didn't want to ones that you didn't have the power for yet, well, it leans to one side, and I'm sure you can guess which. The game is impossible to complete without doing a lot of these time trials and ring challenges that I guarantee you do not want to do. The second to last time this happened, my progress was blocked, I counted that it took doing at least 4 of these extra sliding or driving missions throughout the entire game to unlock the music missile power that I needed to proceed. I made the mistake of assuming that that was going to be the last set of backtracking I needed though. After that level ended and I was told I needed a grand total of 50 now to rebuild the car, I didn't recount, and honestly, I don't think I want to. If my memory isn't deceiving me though, based on the number of peanut butters in that stage which required the missile power, I believe the grand total number of extra time trials and ring challenges required to be completed in order to get to the end of the game is either 7 or 8. Both of those are preposterous numbers. I can't imagine playing this game as a kid, being subjected to that sort of forced crap in a freaking SpongeBob movie tie-in game. The final boss was the nail in my coffin. This is one of the worst sections in any game I think I've ever played, and I'm not joking when I say I'd rather redo the jellyfishing contest in Dutchman again than play this boss battle. The boss has 3 phases which each also serve as a checkpoint, which is kind of goofy but absolutely necessary. Still, maybe when you're making a boss battle for a SpongeBob game and you need to put checkpoints within it, this is an indication that you're doing something wrong! The first phase kind of just introduces the weakness to you. You've got to go around hitting the tables, and then when he uses his special attack, hide behind Mr. Krabs, and his laser sets off like this chain reaction that ends with him being stunned, and then open for a missile attack. It takes 2 hits to knock him into the next phase. The second phase is an insult to all of platforming. This time his attack is this insane laser pattern on the ground. The problem is that it has no shadow, and so without any point of reference it's impossible to understand the relationship between your position and the lasers. It takes a good amount of effort to get used to it and start to learn how to dodge the attack, and it's way too much for a game like this. The final phase we discussed earlier. I left out 2 very important things though. Well, 3, but I mean it's pretty obvious that the floor falls apart here. The first is that it's impossible to hit him with the missile when he's stunned without first having taken out the 2 projectile shooting enemies. The animation for launching the missile plus the time it takes for it to go from you to him is greater than the time it takes for these 2 dudes to shoot their mucus balls at you. And if they hit you while you're guiding the missile, it cancels your attack. So I wasn't complaining about the complexity of that for nothing. You have to do this. The game demands this much of you. And that wouldn't be an issue if they gave you the proper tools to do what they're asking you to do. The game's basically giving you a hammer and a nail and telling you to make a video on YouTube with it somehow. Oh yeah, let me just render my freaking The other thing I left out was the music. In this phase, the Goofy Goober rock song plays, and yeah, sure, that's cool. Every time you die, though, which happens a lot as a consequence of that aforementioned difficulty, the track resets and some very loud man reinforms you of his status as a Goofy Goober before proceeding to rock!
All hail, Plankton!
You're a Goofy Goober! I'm a Goofy Goober!
This is one of the most annoying things ever! You can't just die and reset peacefully. As soon as you start back up, this dude is yelling! Maybe he's not yelling at you, but given enough time, it starts to feel that way. This is what I was talking about at the beginning. The game doesn't feel like a SpongeBob game, and it doesn't really benefit from any of the SpongeBob assets it uses. The music here does not set the mood. In the movie, this song played as SpongeBob utterly annihilated everyone. Here, though, this epic rock song plays over one of the most frustrating parts of the entire game. There's a whole different mood here. There's struggle here. I haven't won yet. Why is this celebratory music playing? This music is annoying. It's getting on my nerves. The music alone almost caused me to just give up. I really didn't see the value in completing this boss battle. I eventually did do it, but I honestly regret it. I don't think it was worth it. Just to hear a bird chirping for some reason over the credits music. And then see the game take me back to that awful first level? I don't think it was worth it. So, recap. The combat is bad, mostly due to poor enemy design. The enemies in this game are some of the worst I think I've ever encountered in any game, ever. They just aren't fun to fight and don't match the ability set of the player. The platforming in main stages is pretty simple and not really worth discussing. The special challenge stages have a broken timer and just aren't a good match for the platforming mechanics in this game. In various different places, platforms aren't timed properly with each other, which leads to feelings of irritation and dissatisfaction in the player, possibly also harming the player's learning of the level's obstacles. This breaks a fundamental design principle of platform games. The sliding and driving levels both have their fair share of technical issues, but do alright for their respective basic challenges, though they are kind of draggingly long and don't have great affordance when it comes to the ones that have objectives to complete. The time trials and ring challenges, however, don't function as they should. Each of these tracks asks you to complete a total of 4 challenges that technically could have all been completed in a single run if the game were designed better. Mechanically, technically, functionally, however you want to say it, this game is a disaster. Now, there's one thing I haven't talked about yet, and that's presentation, and I'm hoping that after having seen so much footage of the game, I don't have to go too deep into it. Basically, the game looks pretty bad and barely has any polish. From the first level, the first thing you do is turn around and take a look at the crowd standing there behind you, only to see that none of them are animated. They're just a bunch of static mannequins doing nothing. You proceed a little further and you see one of the worst truck models I think anyone has ever created. Like, what is this? What is going on with the headlights? What is going on with the front? What is going on with the window on the side? What is this? Then you move a little bit further and you see some weird shading stuff starts happening. Like, is this an issue with like a specular map or something? Is that what this is? I think that's what this is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, that's pretty messed up. Why is the ground completely dark from this one angle but perfectly visible from the other angle? What the heck is happening here? The whole game lacks polish, but there are also many specific instances of visual mistakes. My favorite are the walls with this water effect on them despite not being near any water. You see this a couple of times. My favorite is in the last level because there's like 2 of them side by side and it's like, what's going on here? How, like, why did they put a water effect? Was there water here at one point and they forgot to get rid of it? Like, and why is it just this one wall? Like, what's going on? There's also the fact that the bubble sprites lose their transparent sections in that last level. Like, look, you can see the outline of the image. You can see the parts that are supposed to be transparent. Like, what did they goof up on here? Are they using a different bubble thing? Did somebody just like open it up in Photoshop and like change the colors to orange or something? Like, and like, why is the transparent section not transparent anymore? What's going on? It looks awful. All of the bubbles just turn into orange squares. It's like the dumbest looking thing. I hate to say it, but it also doesn't help that every level in this game is ugly and gross. Every single stage looks like Kelp Forest from Battle for Bikini Bottom and Downtown from Dutchman. Both the ugliest levels from those games. Everything is so dark, it looks so bad when they pull up close to a character from time to time. These visuals paired with this really, really bad music, it's not a pleasant experience. It's kind of like they went to the artist and the artist was like, oh, you know, what kind of vibe are we going for? And somebody just looked at them and said, think vomit. And they were like, you got it. And then they spewed all this crap out and now you just have to play a whole game of it. Even the David Hasselhoff stage manages to look gross. Like, Come on. Other than SpongeBob and Patrick, the main levels don't feature any other familiar characters or NPCs like the previous game did. The world feels so lifeless and dull. The cutscenes, oh man. So the cutscenes are all stills, and they look almost like concept art for the movie, but worse. Like, sometimes the images they use are totally generic pictures of the characters. Like this ending cutscene, some of the shots of SpongeBob are straight up like the first Google image results for him. Like, you ever have a SpongeBob themed birthday party or been to a kid's house that had one? This is the picture you see on the cake, on the birthday cards, on the shirt, on the hat. This is the most ultimately unoriginal picture of SpongeBob, and here it is in the game, in the final cutscene. I don't know what this junk is, but I know it's junk. And the animated cutscenes are no better. They suffer from, you know, the grossness of the whole freaking game. Look, I don't know what else to say. This game works. It functions on some level, but it's just not fun. There are too many little issues sprinkled throughout it that over time are enough to break a man's will. And what doesn't help this game's case is that the game that came before it is almost mechanically identical, but doesn't suffer from any of these issues. For 3 years, people have been asking me to review the SpongeBob Movie Game. I consider what just happened here a critique, but you still want a review? You want me to help you decide whether or not you should buy this game? Here it is. If you played Battle for Bikini Bottom and didn't enjoy it, do not get this game. If you played Battle for Bikini Bottom and did enjoy it, do not get this game. If you haven't played Battle for Bikini Bottom, just play that instead. If you're a fan of SpongeBob, Battle for Bikini Bottom does a better job adapting that brand to a game than this does. If you're just a fan of 3D platformers, Battle for Bikini Bottom is a much better one. It's actually a really good one. What new and interesting changes this game does bring to the table are so minor in their impact that they aren't worth the discomfort of wading through all of the massacred inherited features from Battle for Bikini Bottom. It's not worth it. There's no reason to play this game over the other. Say what you will. Tell me I'm only being so negative because the game was hyped up for so many years for me. I've already been told that and the video's not even out yet. Say that though, and please know that you're wrong. Coming in from Battle for Bikini Bottom, I expected this game to be at least as good as that one, especially since it's built on the back of it. What I didn't expect was a total hack job of turning an open hub world based platformer into this linear mess of a game. It's unfortunate that they had to work under such strict time constraints. If that weren't the case, the game would have likely been so much better. I think my explanations throughout the video prove that my reception of this game isn't due to hype at all, but rather comes from my analysis. An analysis that went as deep and was handled with as much care as the Battle for Bikini Bottom one that likely brought you to this video in the first place. Is the movie game good? Well, I wouldn't consider it above average. Right now on the ordinal game scale, Gex 2 is set as the average game. And honestly, I would rather play Gex 2 than play the movie game. I think Gex 2 is better than the movie game, but I don't think it's as good as Battle for Bikini Bottom. Where the movie game gets placed exactly is up to you though, as I invite you to the next planning poker session on the Discord that I will be hosting at some point after the publishing of this video. And with that, I'd like to take a quick moment first before I meet you again in the end screen. As far as I'm concerned, I'm done with SpongeBob now. This 4-year journey ends today with the movie game. You know what, while we're at it, I've had this box sitting around because I use it as a prop in all of the things, and the lore is that the box is like somewhere else, and it's not been on the stack, but I'm going to be putting it at the bottom of the stack right now, okay? Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, bada bing bada boom. Battle for Bikini Bottom is here, but I don't have the original box, so I think it's on like a special little, yeah, it's right there, okay. Whoa! Sure, I'm a SpongeBob fan in the sense that it was a big influence on me as a kid, but I have a bachelor's of engineering now. I'm an adult, believe it or not. I'm not up to date with the current goings-on in the SpongeBob fandom. As a matter of fact, I stopped watching the show after the movie. A lot of people did. Revenge of the Flying Dutchman, Battle for Bikini Bottom, and the movie game are the only games that represent an era of SpongeBob that was relevant to me. Beyond that point, I'm not really interested. That was kind of the point of that dialogue in the outro of the HeroPants video. I played that game and I saw how awful it was. There's a clear decline in the quality of the show and of the games over the passing years. A decline that I pointed out, I'm aware of, and I'm not interested in experiencing myself. Sure, people tell me all the time now that the show is great again, they have the old writers and everything. That, like, you know, great, like good for you, but I don't care. I don't watch SpongeBob anymore. I will rewatch the stuff that aired when I was a kid, those are classics, but I'm not interested in the new stuff. I am not an authority on SpongeBob, beyond what was relevant to me, of course, and I feel like some people often make the mistake that I am. Please, before hounding me to cover another SpongeBob game, just consider that I won't listen. I'm not gonna let this become a meme again. I don't think anyone but me truly grasps the sheer quantity of these requests to do the SpongeBob movie game, no matter what I did, it was constant requests. I don't want that to happen again. If you have any other questions about anything else, fire them my way, but as far as SpongeBob goes, I'm gonna handle that at my own pace. I'm not saying I'm never gonna look at another SpongeBob game again. Odds are I will. I'm just saying don't hold your breath till next year. I'm done with the annual tradition thing effective immediately. You know, to me, the movie game was always the last one I was going to do. After that, it was over. That's always kind of been my goal state since the beginning. I've gained a lot of respect for some of these games and the community that surrounds them over the years. You guys are some of the most passionate and creative people out there. I'm glad to now be a part of this community, and I'm glad that you guys were able to be a part of this saga, or this quest, if I'm allowed to call it that. Thank you guys so much for your time and support over the years. Like I said, Discord planning poker session happening sometime after this, so once you've seen the video, see what's going on Discord, maybe you'll be just in time for it. And I leave you now with the conclusion of the Phantom's lore for the outro. So, see you at the end screen. What's the matter with you? You son of a... Oh my God! Why do I have to... No! I won't let you have it! This is what you want! I'm not gonna give it to you! No! No! Oh my God! He's got a sledgehammer! Oh my God! Forgetting something.
So someone just ran.
Huh?
Someone just ran behind the thing. They like got out, they're like the police and ran away.
Hey, hi. How you doing?
Hi.
Hello and welcome to the end screen! So first and foremost, as it applies to what you're seeing around here, as you may know, YouTube has deprecated annotations. My end screens are very dependent on annotations, and the end template, or the end whatever the heck that thing is that they gave as an alternative just does not meet the requirements that I need. So what does that mean? Am I going to end the end screen? Absolutely not. The end screen lives on. What I'll be doing from now on is instead of annotations on the screen, I will be putting links in the description. You'll still see the images floating up around here, and it'll look good. Alright, here we go. We're going to take some of this. This is the spiciest hot sauce I got in my collection right now. It's Cajun Habanero. We're going to have a good time. Okay, oh my god, first of all, you guys just saw the outro. I'd like to give a major shout out to my brother and my sister who helped me film that outro. My sister did most of the filming, and my brother, you know, the whole reveal was that it was me, but when you're filming a scene, you obviously need two people to have a fight scene, so my brother played the other one. My brother was in town for a little bit, so I thought it'd be fun to do that. We smashed the melons and everything. I'm not gonna say anybody's names because that's kind of weird, because you guys are kind of weird about that stuff I've already experienced. That's why I'm parked on a freaking Instagram handle now, you monsters. But my brother asked me to call him Sigint, and he said credit me as Sigint, so Sigint, because that's kind of what he does, like from Metal Gear Solid 3 Sigint, so that's kind of actually what he does, which is pretty cool. Anyways, so thank you Sigint and my sister. Now throughout the video you might have seen a little subtitle or something come up, or you might have heard some music, so I'd like to acknowledge and credit and shout out the creator of the music that played in this video, and possibly the outro. I'm not sure currently what's happening with the outro. Anyways, I'll explain. Autumn the Weirdo is a longtime fan here. You might recognize her handle from Discord and from Twitter, and I believe she made one of the pictures that I used in the Metal Gear Solid 5 video. Anyway, she produces a lot of music, so I asked her for this video if she was up to the challenge of producing some music. For the scene, I had two tracks in mind that I wanted to use that came from Metal Gear Solid 5's soundtrack, and I asked if she could maybe make them SpongeBob-y, and if she could do something like that, I would use it in the outro. So, depending on what you've seen in this, if the outro didn't play her music, then I was going to use the music as background music throughout the things. I kind of told her, like, the music I have right now fits really well, but if your tracks work better, then I'll use those. So I don't know exactly how at this moment, because I'm filming before the music is done, but I don't know exactly where the music is used, but wherever it's used, you probably heard it. You can check out those tracks. There will be links in the description or something, because you can't put annotations anywhere anymore. But major thank you to her. I kind of just like brought this up. I was like, hey, this would be kind of cool, and I was thinking about this, and I know that she makes like remixes of Battle for Bikini Bottom music. Major thank you to her for her excellent work. Check out her music, guys. Check out her channel, and yeah. Now, what I gotta tell you about is in the outro there, you saw some cop cars. So I need to tell you the story of what happened when we were filming this, okay? So we go out there, right? And you know, I tell them like, okay, we're gonna do this like little fight scene. I'm telling my brother we're gonna do some fighting, and my brother knows a lot of different like close quarters combat and stuff like that. So I'm like, you just tell me what to do. We ended up just turning it into total goofs because I couldn't follow him. Like, and there was also the fact that he had the mask on, so he couldn't always see me. Like, we were able to get the disarm. Like, I don't know if you see because it's so dark in the shot, but I was holding that gun, and then he kind of pops up from behind the bush and then disarms me. He was able to get that to work, but we couldn't really get anything else to work. That's kind of why he like kneed me in the butt, because he was trying to do some like moves on me, but he just had no visibility, and I couldn't like respond properly to the things he was doing, so we turned it into a goof. But he's a pro at this stuff. So we're out there, and you know, we're in the public park, and stuff starts going down as things do in the public park. So some cars start showing up. So there's like a little chalet near where we're filming, and a car pulls up and it parks in the back of the chalet, and the guy left his freaking lights on. He was ruining our lighting. Our lighting was all red and everything, and it like really sucked. And then other people started coming. Clearly there was some sort of sale going on or some sort of transaction. Don't know what was happening, but I know you could tell something was happening. By the end of the night there were like 5-6 cars maybe there that were all pulling up to different places. At one point it was funny because one dude gets out of his car and he's like walking towards the other car, and I just like, I'm fully decked out as like Big Boss, and I just look at the dude, I'm like, hey, are you going over there? And the guy's like, yeah. I'm like, hey, can you tell the guy to turn off his lights? He's ruining our shot. And he's like, oh yeah, no problem, man. And the guy goes and they turn off the lights. So I mean, at least they were nice, you know, they weren't jerks. So we're filming and everything, and you know, people are passing by, so it was kind of interfering with our time. Like, we kept having to like wait, because like these guys come, like, I get it, you know what, you really gotta get your fix, but you're breaking the law paw and you're holding me up, buddy. You're gonna park down the street and then you're gonna sit there and freaking mosey on down and I have to wait for you so that you're not in my shot? Come on. Not very courteous. Except for that first guy, but most of them not very courteous. So we're doing the filming and we did the part with the smashing of the watermelons and the whatever the heck that other melon was. And the guys, you know, we hear them in the background, like they're doing their business, but they're like laughing because they weren't that far from us. Like we could hear them, like they're, look at that crazy guy, they're freaking out, they're having a good time. So we're filming and we had just finished smashing the watermelons. Like the melons were destroyed and we were about to do the next shot. I was in the new costume. I wasn't dressed as Snake anymore. I was in the new costume. My brother and my sister were there. My sister had the camera. I was in the trench coat with the hood and I had the mask on and we were about to do a shot where I take the mask off, right? And suddenly we start hearing the guys in the corner and they just start yelling. They're like, police, police! And we look and there's a cop car that just turned the street and it's coming down to where we are. And these guys start going freaking bananas. Dudes are jumping out of their cars. They're jumping into freaking bushes. They're running out. They're jumping fences. Like the most like it's like insanity. People are going crazy. Cars are like pulling out, zipping off. They're going crazy. The cop starts coming down. This is the interesting thing. I don't know if the cop was called on them or if they were called on us. Because what happens is the cop car starts coming and these guys are getting in their cars and they're zipping right by the cop. The cop doesn't even care. He parks, he turns around, and he stops in front of us. So either what happened was the cops were called to come check out whatever the heck was going on over here and bust up God knows what. And then they saw us and they thought we were maybe more interesting and more dangerous, so they investigated us instead. Or we had the police called on us for smashing a watermelon in the park. Either way, we saved those guys' butts. Like, those guys would have been wrecked if it weren't for us being there filming. These guys would have been destroyed. And then the cop just pulls up right in front of us and asks us what we're doing. He's like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, oh, we're just, you know, we're having a good time. We didn't even say we're filming a video, but then they saw the camera and they're like, oh, you're making a movie? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, okay, clean this up. But it's, like, there was watermelon juice everywhere. Like, it was like a murder. Because we had the costume set up, right? So we had, like, the military fatigues and, like, the camouflage and everything, like, sitting there. And then we just had watermelon everywhere. But yeah, after the cops left, we continued filming, and then like slowly but surely people started like coming out of the bushes and like going back and stuff and picking up all the stuff they left or whatever. It was a great experience. I'm glad we had that time together while my brother was in town. It was pretty good. Yeah, and that's all I got for you today. So again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the finale of the SpongeBob saga, of the SpongeBob, well, what's a trilogy with 4 though? Like a quick trilogy? I will see you guys on Discord for the planning poker. Sayonara, thank you again, and bye-bye. Patrick, time for some sloppy.